Tonight on CFTK-TV News, the Skeeter riding candidates had an all-candidates forum in Kitimat. The North Coast candidates had the same kind of event in Prince Rupert, and Canadians are getting caught in major Middle Eastern crossfire.
Northwest BC's only television news team. We are CFTK-TV News.
Good evening, I'm Cale Maslin, and here's what's making the news in the Northwest and beyond for today. It was announced not too long ago that funding from BC's Housing's Indigenous Housing Fund has been successfully allocated by the Nisga'a First Nation so that they can build 3 new apartment projects. And through these projects, the nation will end up adding around 67 new affordable rental homes to their local lands. The exact locations of these projects are said to be in New Ianch, Lagaltsap, as well as Gitwoodsilk, and will include a range of different accommodations such as family spaces, places for elders, and of course, spots for individuals living on their own. However, it was not specified just how long it could take to build up all these spaces, nor was there a date predicting as to when they might end up be opening for public use. The Transportation Safety Board said in a statement that a fatal helicopter crash that happened back in November 2022 took place only minutes after the pilot reported himself to be shivering uncontrollably. The board's report mentioned that the aircraft was on a surveying flight on BC's north coast when the pilot reported being in distress about an hour and a half into the flight. Inix said the Airbus helicopter was fitted with a tracking unit, but there wasn't enough data to figure out the aircraft's exact maneuvering right before it went down. The report last said the pilot had up-to-date medical certification, but he had been sick in the days leading up to the crash, and his feverish symptoms on the flights suggested that he likely experienced some incapacitation before the crash. Last night in Kitimat, our Skeeter riding candidates went head-to-head over political queries at the Mount Elizabeth Theater for the All Candidates Forum. Here's CFTK's Jaylene Matthews with more.
The Kitimat All Candidates Forum saw discussion on services, business, taxes, and transgender rights. Here's what the candidates said about the BC economy.
The BC NDP has made some really clear choices around these issues to invest in infrastructure and people and services that were drastically cut under the previous government, under the BC Liberals. I was a reporter at the Terrace Standard in the early 2000s when the Gordon Campbell government was in, and I wrote story after story after story about the public sector being cut, about classrooms being cut, classroom sizes not being limited. We lost people in the forestry sector. We lost appurtency to mills and forest licenses. There was a lot of decisions that were made then that we needed to start recovering from when the BC NDP came into power. And I think that finding and like growing our economy at a sustainable rate and still providing services is always the question the government deals with. And I think that it's a bit of a misnomer that the economy isn't doing well here. Last year, we've seen some of the strongest private sector job growth in Canada, in British Columbia.
I think that we need to focus on a smaller, more efficient government. Again, that comes to the entire concept of the bureaucracy. It has grown exponentially in the last 7 years. We need to be promoting small business and driving investment in this province. Currently, we have 17 mines in BC that are permitted or are about to be permitted. That represents a $38 billion investment in this province. That's how we will generate revenue for the province to ensure that we don't have cuts to services, that we can, in fact, invest that money back into communities. With these mines, it's $800 billion that would be added to our GDP over the lifetime of these projects. So it's not about looking at ways to cut back on services. It's about finding ways to drive more investment, to allow the private sector to do what it does best, to encourage investment specifically in areas like ours, getting different industries like forestry back up and running. There were successive policies brought in by the NDP that have driven up the costs in forestry. And it's unrealistic at this point for people to want to invest in that industry. We need to make some significant changes there.
And another contentious topic, the demand for a detox facility in the Skeena.
I've spoken to the Minister of Mental Health in my capacity as a city councillor, along with our city council. I've put forward resolutions to advocate for detox in the Northwest. I've joined my city council colleagues in supporting the First Nations Health Alliance proposal for land-based, culturally sensitive detox and recovery services in this region, and I understand that there will be some action on that. And we know that we have a foundry that has come here, and that's something that we needed to advocate for a very long time.
The current government has had 7 years to try and address this problem. And apart from, some harm reduction measures that have been put in place, we haven't seen any significant growth on that. We need to start prioritizing harm prevention and recovery. And I have a personal background and story with addiction. I am a recovered addict. I went to treatment 13 years ago. And so I'm in a unique position to understand both sides, to understand what goes on with people that are struggling with mental health and addictions problems. I think that I am uniquely qualified to be able to address that issue in this area because I can see where the gaps are.
Tonight, the candidates face off again in Terrace. For CFTK News, I'm Jaylene Matthews.
Also in Prince Rupert yesterday, candidates Chris Sankey, representing the Conservatives, and Tamara Davidson, representing the NDP, shared their ideas for the North Coast riding at another all-candidates forum. CFTK's Jaylene Matthews again discusses it further.
It was just 2 candidates going head-to-head at the forum in Prince Rupert Wednesday. Candidates responded to a variety of questions, including their plans to address the housing shortage.
Housing supply is the real issue. Here in Prince Rupert, in the North and Central Coast, and Haida, for example, we supported the building of new housing projects with over 216 new units, and 200 more are underway. We're the only province in Canada to support on-reserve Indigenous housing projects. In fact, yes.
All the families here in Prince Rupert are bundling up in a 2 or 3 bedroom house that is unlivable. We can't have that in a place that is resource rich. We should not be having that. In fact, I want to go back to the city's 2030 plan, where there's 1,000 units that was designated to be actually built in the downtown core, with additional 3,000 to 5,000 units that would roll out as support expands. It's very expensive to build here.
And the best way to proceed with the delayed downtown roundabout project.
I believe we should take that money and build and fix up the infrastructure underneath where it was supposed to be built. The reason is because the city is $800 million in infrastructure deficit. We need to help them and pour that money back into the area where it's needed most. Is our virtual, incredible infrastructure that we need. John Rusted has committed $1 billion in infrastructure development, and it's important that we again go back to what was actually initiated by the BC Liberals, which was the infrastructure and water. So going back to your question, the roundabout, the money for that should be poured into areas of need within the community.
Our government is here to support the city of Prince Rupert. The city, the mayor, the councillors, they know its needs better than anyone else. The provincial government is here to provide the resources and the support for this and any other project that the city brings forward. Whether it be a housing project, the resource benefit agreements, new schools, or new infrastructure, we will support the city of Prince Rupert. It's not up to us to impose our views onto local government.
The election is October 19th. For CFTK News, I'm Jaylene Matthews.
Coming up next, the way people vote in the upcoming BC election is set to change. Welcome back. The way we cast our ballots is changing this election, and how our votes are counted is set to be dramatically faster. Elections BC is promising a quick and easy process, hoping it will lure more people to the polls. Over to CTV's Rob Buffum with more.
Ever so quiet, just a little hum, but very speedy. Elections BC is going high-tech, streamlining the upcoming election.
They will provide better service to voters in British Columbia.
The technology, first tested in by-elections in 2022, will be rolled out for the first time in a general election. It involves laptops for people to sign in. Maximum wait times, promises Elections BC, 5 minutes. Not only will the new system make voting faster, it's also going to make counting the ballots a lot faster. This tabulator automatically counts the votes, storing the data, removing the step of a hand count after the polls close.
All right, your ballot's been cast.
With the exception of some mail-in ballots, Elections BC predicts 98% of the votes across BC will be reported within 1 hour of polls closing. But any recounts would need to be done by hand. Still, it's hoped these new efficiencies will get people to the polls.
I'm hoping that that may encourage more people to decide they're going to go cast their ballot.
Most folks say they'll vote, machine or not.
Just the way us old farts have been taught.
I always vote, yeah.
But turnout last time was a record low, just 53%, part of a troubling trend.
These elections are being decided by half the population, the party that wins, with half of that. So we're getting a government that's been elected, roughly a quarter of the eligible voters.
This time, without the constraints of a pandemic and with a fierce and tight race, experts say participation could increase.
And some voters, particularly conservative voters, are really motivated right now. And so we may see turnout go up just because of those motivated conservative voters.
The new machines will be out in time for 6 advance voting days starting October 10th. Voting on October 19th, Election Day, runs from 8 until 8.
Imagine living without power for more than a month. That's exactly what's happening to tenants in East Vancouver. A fire damaged the building's electrical supply, and the landlord has told them that they had better leave because it will likely take over a year to fix it. And as Kevin Chirac reports, the renters aren't leaving without a fight, not in the middle of a housing crisis.
The lights are out.
My stovetop doesn't work.
Home cooking off the menu.
Only source of light.
Anna, too, and other residents in this Joyce Street building have been without power since a fire broke out August 15th, causing serious damage, the property manager says, to the building's electrical supply. Janina Solis lives in and runs her shop from the building, living with her husband and 2 children.
My eldest is in grade 3, so they're doing a lot of math, so we have to spend a lot of time in coffee shops and libraries when normally we could enjoy those to the comfort of our home.
The property manager told its tenants they have to leave, citing multiple electricians' advice that it could take years to fix the issue.
It does feel like we're being pushed out because the only solution that they have brought up to this point is to leave the units and get our compensation for the rezoning.
Adding to the mess, the building's up for rezoning and could be torn down as early as next summer to be replaced by a 100-plus unit mixed-use building.
We are definitely going to fight this. We've been in, all of the tenants have come together and formed a collective. We've also had a lot of support from the Vancouver Tenant Union.
In Vancouver, this is the status quo.
Ben Gurr with the VTU says displacement is becoming more common in the neighborhood.
I think this building is a perfect example of what that looks like, because not only are the tenants being pushed out because the landlords don't want to spend money on a repair that can be done, the building is also scheduled for redevelopment into a much larger condominium.
The property manager disputes this, telling CTV News, "Please understand that the landlord is not evicting the tenants out of malicious intent or business interests. This is a safety issue in the last resort when there is just no faster and safer way to get the building back to being in habitable condition." Tenants say moving right now, even with some compensation, isn't viable.
It's anywhere upwards of $700 to an extra $1,000 a month, and that's just not affordable.
At the very least, the tenants want the landlord to cover costs for generators, but the landlord says that's unrealistic and could pose a safety risk, as the tenants now brace for colder weather ahead. Kevin Chirac, CTV News, Vancouver.
Turning to tonight's weather, the North Coast will deal with rain and a low at 9 degrees. The Terrace-Kitimat area should get periods of rain of its own as their low sits at 8 degrees. And the Bulkley Valley and Lakes District is set to probably end up seeing rain as well, while their low is down at 4 degrees. On the North Coast, the upcoming week will see at least one sunny day, but clouds and rain outside of that, and the high will jump between 10 and 14 degrees. In the Terrace-Kitimat area, the week for them may give a tad bit of sun, but will mainly be home to rain and clouds as the high shifts from 12 to 9 degrees. And in the Bulkley Valley and Lakes District, the next week or so will get a pair of sunny days to go along with the rainy and cloudy ones as the high bounces between 11 and 14 degrees. Checking out the highways now, visit Drive BC for the latest and up-to-date conditions, and as always, drive safe out there. On Highway 16, there is water pooling, bridge maintenance, other maintenance, utility work, construction work, line painting, and ditching. Highway 37 has some maintenance, water pooling, and roadside brushing. 37A has ditching as well, and there is some construction work and water pooling on the Nishka Highway. And this is what the roads were looking like this afternoon around the region from the view of the province's highway cams. Still to come, the Liberal government has survived a non-confidence vote. Welcome back. Canadians are getting caught in the crossfire between Hezbollah and Israel. Global Affairs has confirmed that an Israeli airstrike in Lebanon killed 2 Canadians. CTV's Heather Wright reports on the growing death toll in the escalating Hezbollah-Israel war.
This is the moment an airstrike hit the Lebanese town of Jiyah. An explosion followed by a massive ball of fire. Israeli strikes on targets inside Lebanon continued today as the death toll there also rose. Among those killed, Canadians Hussein and Dad Tabaja. Their son says the couple was trying to flee the south when their car was hit. Israel says it is not targeting civilians. It's going after Hezbollah. Still, the death toll so far includes nearly 150 women and children, according to the health ministry.
All of these precision strikes and targeted strikes that are happening, they're not precise and they're not targeted. They are killing many women and children.
Canadian Stephanie Muhaber lives just outside of Beirut. She has no plans to leave and is trying to do her part to help the thousands that have been displaced.
We are scared, but we're steadfast at the same time.
Some commercial flights are still available as people rush to leave the country, including one Canadian who was able to leave on Monday.
I feel survivor's guilt right now. I feel guilty for being out.
Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister is urging people to leave now, warning the situation becomes more complicated if the airport closes.
Let's all remember that the difference between 2006 and now is that the port of Beirut exploded a couple of years ago. And that also complicates the way an evacuation could happen.
This morning, Hezbollah fired a missile at Tel Aviv. It was intercepted but shows the group's capabilities, despite days of intense strikes.
Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister will meet with Lebanon's Prime Minister on Saturday in New York as world leaders continue to look for a diplomatic solution.
The Trudeau government has survived the Conservatives' first confidence motion of the fall sitting, as expected, but more confidence votes are likely to come, and the Bloc Québécois has now issued its own ultimatum to the Liberal government if they don't play ball on 2 bills. CTV's Rachel Aiello reports.
This was the first, but not the last test of the Liberal minority this fall. The Conservative-led push to bring down the government was defeated, despite pressure from Pierre Poilievre to send Canadians to the polls.
He wants a climate change election. Let's have that election in the right time. Will he call it today?
The Bloc and NDP voted with the government, stating they still have confidence in Justin Trudeau. But before the vote was even called, Bloc leader Yves-François Blanchet issued an ultimatum, giving the government until the end of October to help enact a pair of Bloc bills about pensions and supply management or risk an election before the new year.
There's not so much room for discussion.
Wasting no time, the Conservatives are set to serve up another non-confidence motion on Thursday, a move the Liberals called lame parliamentary games.
But I think it shows the desperation of Mr. Poilievre.
The drama has seized Parliament Hill, but whether it could turn the dial on Canadians' desire for an election is another question.
You could see more votes starting to have an effect on Canadians where they're thinking more seriously about it. But the opposite side to that is there could be a tune-out factor.
Opposition motions have brought down governments before, and with more high-stake votes ahead, the path to staying in power is looking precarious for the Liberals. Rachel Aiello, CTV News, Ottawa.
And now we turn our attention to the stock markets. The Canadian dollar is down 6/100ths of a cent, the price of gold is up $10.20, oil is down $2.02, natural gas is down 7 cents, aluminum is down $17.50, in Toronto the TSX is up 127.95 points, the venture index is up 2.92, in New York the Dow Jones is up 260.36 and NASDAQ is up 108.08. Still ahead, a grocery company is taking a new approach to curb shoplifting. Welcome back. The Retail Council of Canada says that brazen shoplifting is rising and a grocery giant is taking a new approach. Loblaw has launched a pilot project and security guards in some of its stores are now wearing body cameras in order to discourage shoplifters. The move has sparked conversation across the country about privacy. CTV's Stephanie Sykos has more.
Businesses are looking for ways to combat crime.
You're seeing more cameras being installed, better lighting outside and inside. In some cases, you're seeing them maybe rejig the floor plan that they have.
Canada's largest food retailer is taking it a step further. Loblaw has launched a pilot project where body cameras will be worn at select stores in Calgary and Saskatoon in an effort to increase safety and reduce violent encounters. But that's raising some questions.
What are you doing with this data and capturing people's images? Are you keeping it for a week? Are you keeping it for a day? And what are you doing to properly inform people? But the irony is that privacy is dead.
This comes at a time when shoplifting is on the rise, with recent data showing Nova Scotia had the highest rate in the country.
It's not just the bigger retailers that are getting hit with this rise in increased organized retail crime. Small independent retailers are dealing with the same thing, and they don't necessarily have the inventory where they can sustain a major theft from their store.
As for how shoppers feel about the idea of body cameras in grocery stores,
I guess I would be interested to see about what the actual implementation of it brings forward and if it actually changes theft or not, because if it doesn't, then I don't know if the extra measures are needed.
If it's good for catching shoplifters, that's a good thing. But other than that, it's okay with me.
there could be some other advantages when it comes to these cameras.
If there is an incident where someone is seen to be shoplifting, this evidence could then be used in court to possibly convict them. So as opposed to just having an employee testify that that's what they thought they saw.
That's all of our news for now. From all of us here at CFTK-TV News, I'm Cale Maslin, and thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.